Today's gospel reading comes from the Gospel of John, the 17th chapter, and it begins with verse 6. The 17th chapter of John is one long prayer, the priestly prayer it's been called, in which Jesus prays to his Father right before he is arrested and crucified. And he prays for himself, he prays for his disciples, he prays for us. However, you will not on any given Sunday hear this entire prayer, because the people that wrote the lectionary decades ago, the lectionary are the readings that were predetermined that we should read on any given Sunday, they broke the prayer into three parts. We read the first part last year, we read the second part this year, we'll read the third part of the prayer next year. So the only way you'll hear all three parts is if you remember the first part from a year ago, 2020. I'm guessing you don't. But I want you to hear today's gospel for what it is. Jesus praying for you. The Holy Gospel according to John, the 17th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
I have made your name known to those whom you gave me from the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have kept your word. Now they know that everything you have given me is from you. For the words that you gave to me I have given to them, and they have received them, and know in truth that I came from you, and they have believed that you sent me. I am asking on their behalf. I am not asking on behalf of the world, but on behalf of those whom you gave me, because they are yours. All mine are yours, and yours are mine, and I have been glorified in them. And now I am no longer in the world, but they are in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. While I was with them, I protected them in your name that you have given me. I guarded them, and not one of them was lost except the one destined to be lost, so that the scripture might be fulfilled. But now I am coming to you, and I speak these things in the world, so that they may have my joy made complete in themselves. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but I ask you to protect them from the evil one. They do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. And for their sakes, I sanctify myself, so that they also may be sanctified in truth.
Praise to you, O Christ.
It's interesting, the circular way that Jesus prayed. I think it should make you feel better about the way you perhaps pray. We always want to get it just right, not repeat ourselves. Jesus didn't seem to worry about repeating himself. In fact, he does. But if you distill what I read today from the Gospel of John, here is what he prays for. He prays for unity, us with God and us with one another. He prays for our protection from the evil one, protection and unity. And finally, he prays that we will be sanctified in the truth. That is, set apart. Sanctified is to be made holy, which means set apart in the truth. I wonder if when Jesus prayed this prayer, he had any idea what was coming to the world and to God's beloved people in the year 2021. I wonder if he knew how hard it would be for us to discern the truth, how many extra steps it would take for us to decide if something we read or see or hear is true. Now, I realize that Jesus is not praying that we be set apart in the truth of the world. Jesus is talking about the truth, that is Jesus himself, the truth that is the Word of God. And yet, part of the evil that I pray Jesus' prayer protection protects us all from is this attack on this truth that we are living through right now. Because when we do not live in the truth as a people, we turn on one another. People get hurt. People get killed for the sake of lies. Last week I mentioned that I'm taking a memoir class, and this week I'd like to share a little bit more, because some of you have asked me to, about that memoir, because this topic is part of the heart and soul of the memoir I'm writing, which I am calling at the moment Despite. The book is called Despite. It has to do with what it means to be part of the church, where the church is full of fallible humans. We are all simultaneously saints and sinners. Sometimes I wonder if the evil that Jesus prayed we might be protected from includes ourselves, includes the evil that manifests sometimes inside the church. And so I'm going to read to you the intro to my memoir, hoping you might better understand it in relation to today's gospel. I want to write a book about the dark underbelly of the church. And I want to write about how, despite that dark underbelly, which drives people from the church and diminishes or dissolves their faith, God's presence continues to break through and show up in ways that I cannot explain and I cannot deny. That is why I persist in my call as a white, and therefore privileged, woman, and therefore subjected to mistreatment in the way my male colleagues are not, and divorced, and therefore have parishioners speculate on my relationship status and sexuality as if it was their right and even responsibility to do so. I was ordained on July 13th, 2003, after 4 years of graduate school at Trinity Lutheran Seminary in Columbus, Ohio, as a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Despite the word evangelical in our denomination's name, the ELCA is not to be confused with the evangelicals, Christians who follow a theologically bankrupt prosperity gospel that uses the Bible as a weapon to attack and divide and kill, rather than as a mystery to be embraced, explored, and allowed to be an instrument of help, hope, and healing. The third year of my seminary education was an internship at a huge local cathedral with 1,000 members, a full preschool, and 6 paid staff members. I began that internship in July 2001, 6 weeks after my father died unexpectedly, and 6 weeks before 911 succeeded in filling our pews to overflowing midweek for 2 successive nights, something no amount of evangelism had ever achieved. The local news station showed up to film the fear and faith of those who flocked to our doors to pray and hear the ancient words, hoping those words might calm their worried minds, or perhaps bless their growing hatred and fantasies of vigilante justice as the God-sanctioned righteous anger they wanted it to be. On Friday, I went room to room to sit on the floor and talk with the 250 3- and 4-year-olds who graced our preschool between Sundays. I talked to them about how planes do not usually crash into buildings, and buildings do not usually collapse, and that just because the adults in their house seemed unusually sad or angry, it didn't mean they would be sad or angry forever. One little girl decided to back me up by saying that her daddy was going to Iraq soon to make sure no more bad guys flew planes into buildings in our country. She wrapped her blankie around her hair to demonstrate the kind of hats the bad guys wore. 5 days later, on Sunday, I preached from the Gospel of John. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. In that sermon, I clearly said that the events on Tuesday were not God's wrath being poured out on a sinful people, as many televangelists were proclaiming. I urged the faithful to avoid simple explanations to complex problems that culminated in the attack, and instead to listen to where God might be leading us now as agents of hope and peace and help. 2 years later, my candidacy committee would call this sermon sound theology, as they approved me for ordination, despite the fact that the day after I preached it, one woman who had heard it live on Sunday told all the other patrons of the local beauty shop that the intern at her church on Sunday said that this was God's wrath poured out on a sinful people who had turned from God to accept and even encourage sexual deviance such as homosexuality. That's how I learned that people often would hear what they wanted to hear, despite what I had actually said. In the last 20 years, I have been a pastor to 4 distinctly different churches. In the winter of 2001, before I had graduated, I was called to serve a small farming community 30 miles southeast of Columbus. Faith Lutheran was currently worshiping in an elementary school gymnasium. They had purchased 10 acres in the center of this 3,000-person town and needed a pastor to help them construct the physical building that would be their sanctuary. Baltimore had 2 traffic lights, 1 liquor store, 3 pizzerias, an active Ku Klux Klan, and 10 churches. In the spring of 2010, I was called to a church that was celebrating its 150th anniversary. First English Lutheran Church was in the center of a town that had 30% more residents than Baltimore, for a total of 4,000, but 1 fewer traffic light. In their small museum, there is an entire room dedicated to that light, thought to be the first traffic light in the entire United States. Stories about its creation, installation, years of faithful service, and commemoration into the museum are engraved on large tablets on the walls around it. First English also housed a food pantry that served the entire county. On the week of Thanksgiving, People came and stood in line for 2 hours, waiting for the doors of the food pantry to open so they could get their gift certificate for a turkey. When I asked the woman in charge why we didn't let them in to wait in our warm sanctuary, she replied, because we couldn't watch them all, and some might want to use the restroom. This church had a steeple and a bell that the middle schoolers loved to ring by pulling the long rope that extended up into the belfry and allowing the rope to lift them off their feet once the toll began to sound. The belfry needed repair. In fact, it had needed repair for 20 years when I arrived. The church council discussed this every month, but as far as I know, it has yet to be repaired. Asheville itself celebrates the 4th of July each year for a solid week, including Christian worship in the park, at which residents pledged their allegiance to both the United States flag and the Christian flag during worship. In the summer of 2013, I took a call in Melbourne, Florida, to Grace Lutheran Church on the Barrier Islands. Grace had an active preschool, but its congregation had not yet recovered from 2 back-to-back hurricanes 3 years prior. Advent Lutheran Church, a huge cathedral on the mainland with a brand new, paid-for pipe organ, proposed a merger with Grace so that they would be able to stay afloat and rebuild and share resources. Advent also understood that if they were unable to recover, even with Advent's help, Advent would still own the beachside property on which Grace sat, valued at over $1 million. I was called to help with that merger with the senior pastor, a man who had been my dear friend and mentor for 28 years. In the fall of 2016, I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan to lead my last church, King of Kings Lutheran, in whose yard I am sitting right now. King of Kings is the most progressive church I've served. In November 2005, King of Kings was picketed during worship by members of the Westboro Baptist Church, a group that is defined as a hate group according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Westboro presumably targeted King of Kings because of our full inclusion of LGBTQIA plus people. In anticipation of the protests that Sunday, every member of King of Kings came to church with a pride ribbon on their car. Local religious leaders and their members formed a barrier between the protesters and the church so that the members of King of Kings could worship in peace. In 2 of these churches, I was ultimately run out of town, in part because my sermons provoked conversations about racism and homophobia and violence that was a product of both, and the church's complicity in it. In my first church, I was literally run off the road multiple times by residents whose goal was to intimidate me into leaving town. In Florida, the invitation to leave was less violent but more devastating. As the senior pastor who was instrumental in hiring me was also complicit in letting me go just 2 years after I had moved across the country to take the call. This happened despite hundreds of cards and letters from members who wanted me to stay. The dark underbelly of the church is real. It manifests in systemic racism, sexism, public shaming, and promoting a work schedule that denies the Sabbath to anyone who works for the church and many of its volunteers. The divine mystery manifests in miracles of healing, in the holy transformations of the most unlikely characters, and in those who are fed, sheltered, and loved by people and the ministries of these broken institutions. That brokenness had me wanting to walk away from the church from my first week of summer Greek in seminary. Still, I remain, 22 years and 4 calls later, because I have witnessed, in the words of Desmond Tutu, that in fact, goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. Life is stronger than death. That is why, as we emerge from the cocoon of COVID in the year 2021, I believe the church is being dismantled and reformed. And while I don't know exactly what form this new church will take, I am certain that life will rise out of the ruins of all the congregations whose churches have permanently closed, and that the dark underbelly of the church will increasingly be exposed. I believe God will guide us forward in ways that are unmistakably divine. And I want to be present to witness that love rising in the most unexpected ways, despite all the forces that try to bury it for good. And for all of these reasons, I am grateful that Jesus' circular prayer to the Father on our behalf included that we would be protected from evil and sanctified in the truth. Because the truth includes the parts we don't want to talk about. We need to face the dark underbelly of the church. It needs to die. It needs to die so that people will stop being driven from the church, driven out, and hurt. It needs to die so that love can rise up and spread like wildfire. And when people think of the church and those Christians, they will think of love rising, even from the grave.